James Quick is going to come up next. He's a great content creator, he's a speaker. He was previously a dev advocate at PlanetScale. And it should be noted, just became a new dad 5 months ago, which is awesome. We just had a lovely conversation earlier on about kids, and he's going to come up and talk to you all about how to find happiness and grow your career. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Oh, that was even worse than I expected. I don't usually force people to do it a second time, but that was terrible. I'm going to share a couple of personal things with you throughout this talk. The first thing I want to share is that I'm a millennial, so excuse me, and raise your hands if you're behind me. Act like you're excited. I always think about doing this, and I always forget. Yeah? All right, so there's part one. And then I want to kick off this talk with a story. I realized I walked up here without a clicker. That's a terrible mistake. Oh, it's on the set. Thank you. See? Always prepared. Think that's ready, maybe? So I want to start with a personal story, and this goes back to 2015. And in 2015, I was living my ultimate dream professionally and personally. I was professionally working at Microsoft, one of the top tech companies in the world. We've had several representations of Microsoft so far. And personally, I was living in New York City, which was my ultimate dream in the world. And this goes back to my childhood because the Ninja Turtles made New York City look so cool. But this is my ultimate dream, was to live in New York City. And at the height of, again, professional and personal, I was standing on top of the rooftop of my apartment in Brooklyn, overlooking Manhattan, and I got a call. And the call was from my dad, and my dad told me that he had gotten diagnosed with cancer and had 6 months to live. As you can imagine, this was a pretty big shock, and with that information, my wife and I kind of hustled, and within a month, I moved back home, and unfortunately, my dad passed away within a week of me getting home. As traumatic as that is, I started to reflect on the time that I thought I was going to have, the time that I didn't have with my dad, and I started to think about his life and the things he did and the things he maybe didn't do. And I started to think about that with both of my parents. I lost my mom in 2013, and I started thinking about them both, and I realized that neither one of them ever had a career. Probably many people can relate. You've had jobs, but maybe not a career, because my dad never made a lot of money. He never felt respected at what he did. He never loved what he did. He never had a career path. He never had goals. He never had a plan. And so my dad died. He passed away up until the day he died, working a job that he hated, living paycheck to paycheck. And I took that as a promise to myself that that would never happen to me. So this talk is about three things. It's about honesty. It's about figuring out how to be honest with yourself. It's about happiness and how do you find happiness and recognize what that looks like for you. And it's about taking the recognition of both of those things and taking control of your career. My name is James Q. Quick. I am three things. I'm a developer, a speaker, a teacher. I've done some combination of these things professionally for about 10 years. And the thing that really sticks out to me is the teacher aspect. I didn't know this at first. I kind of got thrown into that career at Microsoft where I was doing a lot of this. And I realized I love teaching and working with people. There's a QR code I think some of you have figured out for slides. Link to the website if you're interested. You'll have another opportunity at the end if you want. But I love to teach people, and I love to be on stage and to share. So let's start with the idea of what does stuck look like. How do you know you're stuck? You don't have to raise your hands, but maybe internally, are you stuck in your career? Do you feel like you're stuck? How do you know that? And there's this interesting correlation I have with CrossFit. Super random. And the question is, how do you know if people do CrossFit? Anybody do CrossFit in here? Handful of people? Well, there's this, not old saying, but there's this joke that how do you know if people do CrossFit? Well, you don't have to ask, they will tell you. Because they're very proud of what they do, and they invest a lot of time and energy into that community, into themselves, which is great. But I find this parallel with people that are stuck in their careers, because people that are stuck in their careers, if you pay attention, they will tell you. And they say things like, I don't like my manager. I don't like my team. I don't like my project. There's all this pressure. I don't make enough money. I don't feel respected. But they don't do anything about that. So, in situations like that, when people come to you and want to kind of explain those, I've been around those situations a lot of people that I would consider them to be stuck in their careers, and they would come to me and talk about that. And a good thing to have in those situations is empathy. I've realized that is not something that I have. I am one of those people who is immediately looking to fix the problem, and I understand now that that's not always the case. And if my wife was here, which she's not, I'll talk more about her, but she would be the person in the back vigorously nodding her head, agreeing about my lack of empathy. And that's because when she comes to me with a problem, I go into solution mode, and I don't kind of settle on the hearing and listening. But for right now, this is my stage, and I am going to go into fixing. So let's start with honesty, and let's really challenge yourself mentally for the next 2 minutes. Can you be honest with yourself? This is maybe a little harder than you think. And we're going to go through a couple of scenarios to play you might be stuck if. So these are a couple of red flags for you to keep an eye out for you to consider whether or not you feel stuck in your career. So here's one. How many people, if you're really brave, raise your hand. If you're not so brave, you can just do internally. How many people have ever taken more trips to the bathroom in a day than they needed to, or individual trips to the bathroom you take longer than you need to so that you can be on your phone away from your office, away from your desk? Very brave people, thank you. There was probably about a year span in my career where I spent so much time in the bathroom playing 2048 on my phone that I may have needed to get a doctor's note to explain why. So if you find yourself doing that to avoid going to your day-to-day job, something to look out for. Here's another one. What about how many people at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when typically you go home at 5, how many people at 3 o'clock have internally been trying to convince yourself that it's okay to leave at 3? Or 2. Or maybe you go to lunch and you're like, do I really need to go back today? There's some very aggressive hands, which I appreciate, thank you. The honesty here is amazing. And how about last one? As amazing as All Things Open is, which we can all agree it is, as amazing as it is, how many of you are at least partially here because no matter how good it is, it's got to be better than going back to work? This is the most honest I think I've seen in a crowd. This is great. So these are things to look out for yourself, and you have to spend intentional time reflecting on those. These are comical examples to lighten the mood, but this is a serious topic that you have to take time and intentionally check in with yourself. And this is not just a yearly thing, because your happiness in your career, your feeling stuck, your feelings at what you're doing change on a daily and maybe within a given day basis. So one potential challenge for you, a note that you could take, is put 15 minutes on your calendar each week and just spend 15 minutes thinking about what you did that week and whether or not you enjoyed or didn't enjoy those things and how you felt about that. So let's move into what does happiness look like? And introduction really kind of led into this, I think. But happiness for me in my career, first and foremost, is balance. And I know I sound annoying saying this, and I say it a lot, but my wife and I are the cliche couple. We do everything together. We've played co-ed soccer together since we've been in college. She's in the industry that I'm in. She works at Austeero doing events and sponsorships. I speak at conferences. We travel together. We do all these things. The irony of me saying this now is she's not here today, so anyway. But we do basically everything together. And a new addition to that is now we are a family of 3 with a 5-month-old. Thank you. If you've hung out with me any time during the last day or two, I've broken out my phone and shared pictures. But balance has never been more important than it is now for a family of 3. Now, I've got an interesting topic here, and Ciora is going to come up next. I told her I would do this tastefully, but there's a topic that we have semi-debated about in the past, and it's the idea of passion. She didn't know where this was going yet. And I think Ciora's point, we can discuss later to make sure I'm not speaking for you too much, but I think her point about passion is that companies shouldn't expect or require passion in the sense of being able to use that to overwork you. And it's totally okay to get into a career because of the amount of money that you can make and the benefits. I think part of that, again, we'll talk later. And I absolutely agree with that. The flip side of that is I ask the question why, and this is me personally. And my question for myself, or for you, is why would you not do what you love every single day? And I don't mean at the expense of money. We'll get to that in a minute. I mean make good money, but find ways to do things that you are excited about on a daily basis. A lot of us don't have that luxury, but it is something you can work towards, and it's easy for me on stage to talk about this as if it's a switch that you flip and overnight it's changed. I don't think that at all. What I do think, though, is you can be on a journey to pay attention to the things that you enjoy and work to do more of those things, making sure that you're doing stuff that you're excited about on a daily basis. Now, I told you we would get to money. Balance is my number one priority, followed closely by money. I want to do what I love. I want to have the balance to travel with my wife, to spend time with my daughter, for us to do all the things that we do, but I also want to make really good money doing it. And I don't think there's any problem with that. And so I want to make you a promise for people. How many people, again, internal or if you're brave, raise your hand. How many people feel like you make the amount of money that you think you deserve? If you're a millennial, the answer is never yes. It's always no. Some people may feel a little different. Some people feel like you deserve more. That's great. So my promise to you is right now there is another job at another company maybe that you can do something that makes you as happy as you are now or more and make more money. And I've seen this play out in my career multiple times. Throughout a 2-year span, I basically tripled my salary and had much higher balance and happiness and benefits. And I'm not an advocate for leaving a job every 6 months. I'm not an advocate of just chasing as much money as you can. I'm saying if you maintain the level of happiness that you have now, you can find somewhere that makes more money and not have to sacrifice that balance and happiness. So those are some of the things that stand out to me. Hopefully we saw some hands. Hopefully some of those resonate with you. But let's say you kind of maybe recognize you're stuck. You have an idea of what makes you happy. What do you actually do next? What do you do with that? What does taking control look like? And I want to quote J.C. Smiley, who is one of our leaders in the Code Connector meetup and Slack group. It's really amazing. You should check it out. And he wrote an article about tips for having a successful career. And one of his quotes was, "Never let your career be a coincidence." What does that mean? Well, for me, it means that where you go in your career, regardless of how good or bad your manager is, regardless of how good or bad your team is, regardless of how excited you are about the tech stack that you work on, regardless of how much money you make right now, where you go in your career is ultimately 100% up to you. It's looking at things that you control, not your surrounding environment, and controlling those things to put yourself to be in whatever you consider to be a successful position. So I want to get to another really important topic in here, which is to communicate. And I mentioned I started my career as a technical evangelist at Microsoft, where I was kind of thrust into this world of being on stage and giving presentations and workshops. And I didn't realize this at the time, but when my dad passed away, we moved back to Memphis, and I started working as a software engineer at FedEx. So I was going from the technical evangelist to traditional software engineer, but I realized my superpower was my ability to communicate. I had spent time on stage. I had spent time working in the community, networking, building communities. I had done all those things, and I was able to bring that to not just my technical expertise that I had, but this complementary skill set that not many other people have. So when there was a technical problem to be communicated to upper management, I did it. When there was a question of, are we doing the right thing, I raised my hand and spoke up. I was able to communicate those things because I had been doing that. And one example of that was I walked into my manager's office after being there for a little while, and I said, I think I'm ready for the next level, which was senior at the time. The next level would have been senior. And I said, these are the reasons, these are the things I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in. And she came back a couple days later and said, we have this architect position. Architect position was a skip level promotion that I eagerly accepted. And I don't know this for the fact. I know that didn't happen very often. Maybe I'm the only person that happened to, probably not. But the reason that happened was twofold. It was my ability to communicate and that being a strong set of skills that I have that not many other people could match, and also putting it out there for my manager to know. Speaking it into existence. Now, I know this is super cliche. People say this, and then they leave it at that, and it seems like this magical meta thing of speaking things into existence, and it just happens, and it's wonderful. And that's not real. What happens, though, practically is when you speak things into existence, you're putting it out there into the world, what you want, so when opportunities come around, people know who to go for those opportunities. An example of this for me is last year in 2022, I watched the keynoters on this stage, and I told myself 2023 was going to be the year that I started to do keynotes. I spoke to another conference organizer. I'm fine with that, thank you. I spoke to another conference organizer about a year and a half ago, and I told him my goal next year is to do keynotes. He said, why don't you keynote our next conference? It wasn't this magical thing. He just knew what I wanted, so I keynoted back in January. I did another keynote back in June. I did another one in July. And this is now the 5th keynote that I've given this year. This is not a magical thing. This is just me letting the world know that this is what I want to do. Now, communication is really important, but I want to tell you a really quick story about why communicating the right thing is even more important. So a friend of mine, or a group of friends, I wasn't even there for this, a group of friends of mine in high school, when we had no money, wanted to do like a really nice steak night. They all went out for steak. Graham sat down. They took orders. He said, I want a steak. They said, how do you want it cooked? He said, raw. Waiter paused. He confirmed, raw. Raw. He confirmed again, raw. Graham gets annoyed. I know what I want, raw. The waiter has his orders. He walks away. Not that long later, brings out a raw steak, puts it in front of Graham. Graham looks awkward. Waiter walks away. Graham turns to our friends and says, I don't think they cooked this at all. You may see where this is going. Graham meant to order rare and just was thinking of the wrong word. He communicated the wrong thing and got the wrong thing. So your communication is important, but communicating the right thing is equally, if not more important. Now, the next thing, this is kind of a soapbox for me, is boundaries. And what's interesting about boundaries is you can't expect people to respect your boundaries. You want to know why? Because people suck. And so what's interesting is if you say you end your day at 5 and people send you a Slack message at 6 and you respond, that's your problem. If you set your boundaries, it's not other people's responsibility to abide by them. Actually, it should be. They just won't. It's your responsibility to enforce them. So when you send me a message at 6 and I'm done at 5, I'm not responding. Unless there's like an on-call, like I understand situations happen. But you set your boundaries, you have to enforce those and stick up for yourself. Now, the last item here I want to wrap up with is networking. And networking has this connotation of being terrible, of being super cold and sterile, hi, I'm James, what can I do for you type thing, and I hate that. It drives me crazy. You want to know what networking is? Networking is this. Networking is being with people, and I have a definition of this that I really believe in. Networking is just investing in your community. It's showing up places. It's having the conversations. It's just being there and being a genuine member of community. And there's a few awesome ones I want to shout out. There's Virtual Coffee from my good friend Becca. There's Code Connector from JC that I mentioned earlier. There's Learn, Build, Teach, which is the Discord community that I run. There's amazing communities out there. There's amazing community here for a conference to have run, what do we say, 11 years in a row. It takes a very strong community for that to be successful and continue to happen. So I want to leave you with one really big takeaway here, probably the most important thing, I'll say, is don't leave here wishing you would have done more. You've got such an incredible opportunity of the people around you, amazing developers, amazing open source maintainers, amazing sponsors, amazing booths, amazing speakers, amazing everything that you can imagine is right here in this room. So from a networking perspective, switch that to an investing in your community perspective. Don't leave here wishing you would have done more. Because personally, I believe in the power of people. What I've been able to do in my personal life, in my professional life, comes down to the people I've been fortunate enough to be around. And so as I kind of wrap this up and I go full circle, I think about people that have had impact on my life. I think about my dad, and in some ways showing me things to do, but in more ways showing me things I didn't want to do or I didn't want to be. I think about the relationship that my wife and I have and our happiness in both personal and professional lives and being able to share those together. And ultimately, I think a lot about balance. As we welcomed in our daughter 5 months ago and are figuring out parenthood together. And I focus on balance as I do a lot of things. I co-host a podcast called Compressed FM. I have a YouTube channel. I'm active on Twitter. I run a Discord called Learn, Build, Teach. And I do all of those things because I love to teach. I teach and inspire developers through content all across the world. And my goal today is that some tiny bit of you has some inspiration or some energy after you leave here to pay attention to yourself and be honest with yourself and try to recognize being stuck. To also pay attention and intentionally seek out the things that make you happy. And then use that as a way to try to take control of your career. Thank you.